Hey everyone, welcome to Magnolia United Church of Christ Learning Forum, brought to you by Humanities of Washington. My name is Marcy Scott Weiss, and I'm the senior pastor here at Magnolia UCC, and I'll be moderating tonight's event. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we present this program from the traditional lands of the Duwamish peoples who have stewarded this land for generations. This presentation you're about to enjoy is part of Humanities of Washington Speaker Bureau's program. Humanities of Washington is a nonprofit organization dedicated to sparking conversation and critical thinking, and it provides many other cultural programs to hundreds of thousands of people throughout Washington each year. I'll encourage you to visit their website, and I will post that link in the chat section. It's www.humanities.org. So a quick note on civil discourse. The Speakers Bureau program is designed to generate an open and honest conversation on many topics, some of which may be controversial. We encourage differing perspectives and viewpoints, but we also ask that you treat this topic, the speaker, and each other with respect. Also, please note that this event is being recorded. A bit about our speaker this evening. Tonight, we are honored to welcome Dr. Onur Bakiner, Professor and Director of the Technology Ethics Initiative at Seattle University, where his research interests include technology governance, human rights, and judicial politics. Dr. Bakiner's book, Truth Commissions, Memory, Power, and Legitimacy, received the Best Book Award from the American Political Science Association, and his new book, titled Governing AI, a Primer, was just released on Thursday. Now, tonight, Dr. Bakiner will be speaking for about 45 minutes on power and politics in the age of AI. And we're going to ask you to hold your questions till the end of that 45-minute presentation, when we'll have a Q&A session. But if questions do come up that you want answered, please feel free to put them in the chat section and we'll take them on after the end of the presentation. Now, during our Q&A time, I will also post an evaluation in the comment section, and we would really appreciate it if you would take the time to fill that out. So thank you again to Humanities of Washington and Dr. Bakiner, who I will turn it over to now. Welcome, Dr. Bakiner.
Thank you very much, Marcy, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for hosting me in your space. I'm really honored to present this before you. So before we go any forward, let's start with a poll. So if you can take out your phones and through your cameras, find the QR code. I have a question. What is your initial reaction to artificial intelligence? This is a question that I ask my students a lot, and I'm really curious to see the responses.
Are you taking questions just randomly, or how do you want to do that?
Oh, this is just one. I think there are two questions, but I was thinking of this question, your initial reaction to AI. Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
How do you do that?
Right. It seems like we had 10 responses, and 7 of them, 11. So 8 people register cautious optimism and 3 people register cautious pessimism. So we're somewhere in the middle there, and I'm glad to see the optimism too. So I'd like to actually start with an example. I was not born, but I was raised with the email and the internet, and it is, of course, immensely helpful. I don't think I can get through any day without the internet and email these days. And so in some ways, it was an incredible technological shift. But it also makes one wonder, do we work fewer hours or do we have more meaningful jobs than 30 years ago? Do we have healthier ecosystem of democracy and information than 30 years ago? Do we have better connection, more connection with other people than 30 years ago? I think the answer to some of these questions could be yes, but if it's not a resounding yes, 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 all of that is true, perhaps we should consider what have the email and the internet failed to achieve. And of course, it is not inherently the technology's fault that somehow we can't give a yes to all of these questions, but it seems like uh, those technologies came at a time of commercialization, of computer science knowledge. And in some ways, they expedited the movement of information, but they also did not address the underlying issues around workplace culture and etc. And I'm worried that something similar might be happening with AI, that the technology in and of itself, even if it does not cause um, major negativity or major negative outcomes. In fact, the way that it will have been used will make us go back in 30 years' time and ask, did we make full use of this technology, or has that not really influenced the way that we live and we act? So the premise of today's talk is that the widespread anxiety around AI stems from concrete human experiences that predate but also are amplified the advent of modern AI. Modern technology is embedded in political, economic, social, cultural, and military structures that are experienced as disempowering and alienating to most people. And so existing structures interact with the latest technologies to reshape the distribution of power. So before going any further, I should perhaps say something about AI. What is it? It is a computer system at the end of the day that can improve upon its performance and or automate important tasks. So this can be a major transformation in fields as varied as machine translation, speech recognition, computer vision, and medical science. With that said, there are certain risks that are associated with the development of AI technology. So today's talk is not really going to be about any particular tool or company or process or product for that matter. It's going to be a bird's eye view of artificial intelligence in today's society. So let's talk about some of the perhaps risks and harms. Today's machine learning algorithms that underlie AI take in large quantities of data to make meaningful inferences. So any AI system is really as powerful as the data that it takes in. And unrepresentative data sets or data sets with misleading information in them tend to produce serious problems, or in data scientists' terms, garbage in, garbage out, which I think this cartoon illustrates quite successfully. To add more, there is a host of problems that are associated with today's AI technology. One is the likelihood of generative AI to produce inaccurate output. Sometimes this is called chatbot hallucinations. And sometimes, we refer to it as disinformation or misinformation if this is amplified through algorithmic systems. Now, this has a bearing on public trust as well, because our information ecosystem might be poisoned by widespread disinformation. And then there are other problems. Bias and discrimination on the basis of the amplification of bias and discrimination in data has often been one of the ways in which AI systems have been criticized. To add to that, a lot of automated decision making tends to be opaque and not open to appeals. So explainability is a problem there. And this may complicate the nature of legal, moral, and political responsibility in the future. And of course, one should also think about the intellectual property of those who have labored to bring in what is considered AI input in data visualization, in text, and so on. And then finally, in a few tragic cases, a human interaction with AI in the absence of guardrails can be lethal, especially when young people are concerned. So these are some of the major problems. And of course, the environmental impact is one that we need to increasingly acknowledge in today's artificial intelligence development. Now, so what are some of the proposed solutions then? Maybe you have heard of terms like red teaming or watermarking. So these different techniques to find either sources of problems in artificial intelligence algorithms or identifying AI-generated output, and so on and so forth, testing AI products before they are deployed. In fact, there's an entire academic field called AI for social good or machine learning social good. And so the whole idea is that if technology produces problems, technology can also find the solutions. Another set of perhaps controversial solutions has to do with open sourcing. That is to say, making either the data or the algorithmic weights available to the public. Now, I say controversial because on the one hand, this has the potential to democratize access to AI, but on the other hand, there's also the worry that open sourcing data and algorithms may make it easier for bad faith actors to develop harmful tools. Now, another set of proposed solutions refer to businesses solving their own problems. So businesses establishing oversight boards or compliance teams or creating and enforcing guidelines and standards around AI would be another set of solutions that are often praised as possibly overcoming AI-related problems. And finally, of course, there is the law or administrative decisions to assess AI tools when business fails to do so. Today, the European Union has the Artificial Intelligence Act. In fact, since 2024, an increasing number of countries have been proposing and sometimes passing legislation around AI. In the United States, there is no federal legislation around AI, but several states have passed legislation related to AI in the recent past. Now, before going forward, I would like to say that all of these solutions are actually part of the puzzle. So they're all going to work together to help us address some of the most challenging problems. But I also believe that AI systems are deeply embedded in our social, political, economic, cultural, and environmental landscape. So no partial solution is going to be the perfect fix. So there's not going to be the perfect law to fix it or the perfect business oversight or the perfect technical solution. So what do we need? And here are some of my sources of inspiration from history and today. So left to right, top to bottom, we have Chantal Mouffe, Langdon Winner, Iris Marion Young, Herbert Marcuse, Hannah Arendt, Joy Bolamwini, and Max Horkheimer, and Theodor Adorno. So some of them are no longer with us, and some of them are quite young. So their writings span over a century. They lived in very different times, wrote about very different things, but they could be perhaps brought together under three major headings: critical theory, science and technology studies, and democratic theory. Now, what do we get out of reading them? Especially for people like Marcuse, Arendt, Adorno, and Horkheimer, their problems were deeply embedded in modern societies. They were all immigrants from Nazi Germany to the US. They lost many of their loved ones during the Holocaust, and so they were led to ask, how did this happen? How could something like this happen in a place they called home? And of course, there's a lot more detail in their thinking, but one of the answers they kept coming up with was that technology, understood as narrow instrumentality, technology as dominating nature, dominating other humans, was at least in part responsible for the modes of thinking and acting that created the monstrosities of Nazi Germany. And of course, you can imagine that they were quite pessimistic when it came to technology. They survived Nazism and World War II, but they lived in an age of nuclear confrontation. And so they were constantly worried in the 50s, 60s, that we are really just one button away from planetary extinction. And I think that really shaped their pessimism to a great extent. Let me see, this is a quote from Marcuse: contemporary positivism, semantics, symbolic logic, and linguistic analysis define and filter the universe of discourse for the use of technicians, specialists, and experts who calculate, adjust, and match without ever asking for whom and for what. The occupation of these specialists is to make things work, but not to give an end to this process. I don't think it could have been stated better. Basically, what he's saying is that modern science and technology have been dissociated from the broader question of why. Yes, we can produce things, but why are we producing the things that we are producing? And that divorce between the goals and techniques, according to Marcuse, has led to some of the horrible historic events that I described earlier. Now, in some ways, again, this is written in 1958, yet I think it really resonates, this idea that the better we calculate, the better we predict and estimate, we would be perhaps expected to perform better and do things that are more aligned with human purposes, with the public good, but that's not what's happening here. Now, again, to some extent, that generation was pessimistic and for good reason. Later generations contributed to the idea that we should assess technologies one by one in more nuanced fashion. So, instead of saying that modern technology as such is totalitarian or modern technology as such is meant to dominate, what Weiner basically brought in this article, Do Artifacts Have Politics, is that yes, technology shapes us, but not in deterministic ways. We don't have to be naive techno optimists, but we also don't have to be techno pessimists. Technology shapes us, but also we shape technology. We are not, and we do not have to be helpless in the face of technologies, emerging ones like AI included. Langdon Winner had a lot of very interesting examples to give. He talks about Long Island overpasses that he believes were intentionally low, so that buses wouldn't go through from under the passes, and he believed that that was because the residents of certain Long Island neighborhoods didn't want poorer people, and especially poorer people of color, to come to their neighborhoods. So they basically blocked access to um, public buses with the low overpasses. His claim has been questioned actually, but I think his bigger point stands that sometimes technologies are designed to to enable or in some cases disable human action. He also has this example of tomato harvesters to say that sometimes technology can be influential in unassuming ways or unintentional, unforeseen ways. Tomato harvesting machines were created to benefit everyone. But because they were relatively expensive machines first, actually large businesses, large agro businesses could buy them. And so even if the goal was not to extinguish the small producers, that ended up being the outcome. That after large tomato harvesting machines, large producers basically pushed out the smaller ones out of the market. And so he has all these very interesting examples to make the case that the direction of technology is not predetermined. That we don't have to basically be super optimistic or pessimistic about technology before seeing that technology in action and hopefully having the option to shape that technology. Now, I would like to have perhaps another poll. I believe it is embedded in the same poll number, but it's a second question. So why does AI make us optimistic or pessimistic? And again, describing 1 to 3 words, I'm really curious, what the different ideas are. Is the poll working, by the way? All right, it is working. So yeah, let's take a minute or two. All right, so far with 7 8 responses. So immense potential, lots of portals to it, widespread influence, efficient opportunity. It has bias training sets, worried we're hard coding our biases, systematic discrimination, who controls outcomes, potentially empowering. Maybe I'm missing something. But yeah, so it seems like most of the responses project opportunity and efficiency. Yeah, I mean, medicine definitely it's a field where there's the expectation that pattern matching technologies can improve diagnostics and also drug discovery, and so that is one of the major expectations. We had a conference 2 years ago on our campus where leaders in the medical field basically came, and yeah, I mean that was definitely the more optimistic sort of conversation that we had around diagnostics and drug discovery. And then some of the worries are, I think, about one, bias and discrimination or hard coding human biases into code. In fact, even if it's not hard coded, uh, algorithms have a way of picking up information that humans provide, and so if the human generated data is biased, then there's a likelihood that the outcomes will reflect some of those biases. A few slides ago, I showed some of the problems reported, and a lot of the bias and discrimination cases had to do with that problem. And then control is another one. Who controls the outcomes, or even if nobody can control per se the outcomes, still who gets to make influential decisions and who doesn't, who sits at the table and who doesn't. And a lot of the worries about job replacement or elimination, of course, are also in many ways a reflection of that. It's not necessarily intrinsic to technology to be labor enhancing or labor replacing. It could be either. Yet, if it is going to be labor replacing, it is in great part because humans will make decisions to displace other humans out of their jobs. And so that perhaps brings us to a somewhat less optimistic topic, which is disempowerment and alienation in the age of AI. So, what exactly does that mean? First of all, let's start with the misalignment between the profit motive and human interest. Business interest can serve human interest in many cases. In many cases, sorry, we want to produce good, helpful, safe things, and we want to buy good, helpful, safe things for the most part, and businesses give them to us. So, there's definitely a high degree of alignment with business and human interests in a lot of markets. But when the profit motive is not aligned with the public good, we may have less than ideal scenarios. And so, when it comes to the concrete example of artificial intelligence, um, for example, keeping all customers, children included, hooked on social media may be good business as it maximizes engagement on platforms, but it is not good for the people getting hooked. And so there is that danger. And so when that misalignment exists, how do we bring the businesses back into alignment? I think that is a major problem, major question for our age, especially when we talk about AI. A second issue has to do with the presentation of AI as an expert field. First of all, definitely there is an expert component to AI. This is something for computer scientists, data scientists, mathematicians, people who know machine learning, statistics, linear algebra, social network theory, and so on and so forth, perhaps to be experts in. That is definitely the case, but it doesn't necessarily follow that the rest of us should not be making the decisions that surround AI as an expert field. Sometimes I give this example of flying a plane. Definitely, I want pilots to fly the planes that I fly in, and I want doctors to do surgery and nobody else. But it doesn't mean that aviation policy should be decided by pilots only, or that healthcare policy is something that only doctors have a say in, or hospital administrators have a say in, right? And so similarly, yes, there's definitely an expert component, but it doesn't mean that the broader policy decisions around AI should be left to experts, much less to company CEOs or presidents. And that brings us to a third problem, which is the market concentration of a few companies. So that is and actually a problem. In some ways, AI is presented as a startup revolution. Anybody who has a computer and some compute power can, come up with the next big invention. In theory, that is true, but at least in practice, it seems that much of the AI revolution still is funded by or powered by a small number of actors who hold compute power, who invest or who can invest billions, if not hundreds of billions dollars in data centers. And so in that way, the AI industry doesn't look like a perfect competition. It looks more like an oligopolistic competition where a small number of actors dominate the scene, and then smaller players really have a hard time getting in and being successful. And of course, that also has implications in terms of the distribution of resources, both within countries and across countries. So research and development gaps favor a few companies in a few countries. Well, some of them happen to be in Seattle or around Seattle, but a few companies really can hire top talent. They can invest in research infrastructure, and so of course they get to shape AI discourse more than anybody else. And globally, you have the United States and China in fierce rivalry, and then to some extent, perhaps the European Union, and then countries like, again, to a lesser extent, perhaps Canada, India, South Korea, Israel, and a few other countries that have some AI infrastructure and capacity. But that's a very small number of countries. Most of the world is going to be perhaps a customer of AI, or they're going to be affected by AI, but they don't necessarily produce in large quantities. And so, in some ways, whatever global device that we were talking about before AI may be aggravated by AI developments. And then a final issue, of course, is that the workplace, the modern workplace is a fairly hierarchical place where, there are the workers, and then there is the managerial class, and then above them are typically the C-suite, and they are accountable to shareholders, and in some cases just one boss. And there's a very clear hierarchy between them. And so for most of the world's populations, they are unlikely to have any say in how the future of technology is going to shape up. They are going to receive decisions, but they are not necessarily going to make them. And this may be a problem, a huge problem, especially in the kind of technology like AI that is potentially labor replacing. So, to put it in these terms, this is the problem that we are facing. And nobody really can say this better than Martin Luther King Jr. In his Nobel address in 1964. And I think what is really striking is the relevance of these words almost 62 years later. So, what is the case for politics? In some ways, politics can be seen as the other of technology, but not necessarily in a good sense. I'm a political scientist, so I might be biased, but typically when people think about politics, they think about, I mean, even forgetting about some of the more complicated sort of times that the world populations are going through right now. Politics is often seen as slow decision making, people in Congress fighting each other, not much happening, and so on and so forth. So in some ways, it is the opposite of technology, which always brings this idea that it's all about creativity, imagination, new things, solutions. So what I find really inspiring with Hannah Arendt is that she basically says that modern science and technology do not have the power to take into account the irreversibility of action and human unpredictability. And so they can't really do what has been done. Her example is that humans, when they do something irreversible, they apologize, and that can rebuild a relationship. Or they can make promises, and those promises are obviously contracts into the future. And she says that technology can do no such thing. And so, in some ways, she really reverses the order. And she says that politics is the imaginative, creative human endeavor, not necessarily what happens in Congress, but just the idea of taking power relations into account, building something together, making decisions collectively. And in that way, she finds politics to be way more creative, imaginative than technology. I mean, again, I'm not going to argue which is better or which is more creative or imaginative, but definitely politics has a place to play here. And again, this is not necessarily politics understood as making laws in Congress. This is really politics of the everyday, politics that we can all take part in. So, what is democratic politics, of course? So, what does it mean? One is the democratic control of technology. That is to say, uh, people having debates about the future of technology, people being able to say, well, we want this or we do not want this. So the power of saying no, not treating any technology as an inevitability, but rather treating it as something that we may want or not want, depending on our needs as the public. Politics can be understood, of course, as governmental representation. So we need to always tell our representatives that technology should be shaped in ways that suit us. Yet it's not only limited to this relationship between representatives and the represented. It could also be seen as change driven by social movements. Today, there are nonprofits that are specifically working in the technology sector, but also some nonprofits that are working in sort of more traditional. It could be labor unions, it could be faith communities, it could be human rights organizations, it could be organizations for migrants, for minorities. And so, in that way, this kind of change can be driven by social movements and might have um, implications for technology. Democratization of the workplace. Again, interestingly, that's maybe one of the places where we assume the least about democracy or about democratic potential. But in fact, the workplace can be a less hierarchical place. It could be the kind of place where at every level people are listened to. And finally, there is also an ethical attitude here, and that attitude is public-mindedness. That is to say, I mean, obviously, part of politics is perhaps self-preservation, power for power's own sake, self-interest. Yes, I mean, I will not deny that that's also politics. But politics is also, or can be, about care for the other. It can be an element of growing the pie rather than trying to take the bigger share in the pie. And so that attitude of public-mindedness, I think, is also what democracy means. And I really, really believe that we need that attitude in this age of technological developments. So, what can be done or what is to be done? The first one is, and so I will talk a little bit about some of the more concrete things that we can do. And the first one is to organize. I think we're always going to be in a better position as a society if we have these communities of care. And so when I say organize, this could take the form of responsible technology nonprofits. And again, this is a mushrooming field. There are so many responsible technology nonprofits compared to, let's say, a decade ago. But also traditional human rights organizations, civil rights organizations, labor unions, they have been doing much of this kind of work as well. The second one is learning. So again, I might be biased because I teach at a university, but and especially Seattle U, but like educating the whole person had never been more important. We might not be experts in everything, but we have to be literate in a lot of things. And so this is, of course, a demand on our time and resources. But for those of us who are in the sciences, who are computer scientists, let's say, we might want to learn more about the underlying social, political, economic dynamics. For those of us who come from sort of the world of nonprofits or government or social sciences and humanities, we need to understand the intersection of our specialized field with technology and emerging technologies. We should all be more literate in data, in AI, in data privacy, digital technologies, and so on and so forth. And by the way, we should all learn from one another. Nobody's expertise is any less important in a field like this. So we should really maintain that space of learning between us at all times. This brings us to a third one, that's participation. So again, this is not just in parliaments and town halls. Any place where there is a technology debate, any place where we may be heard is where we need to say, here's my idea, and here's why I think that my idea could work, or perhaps you should consider it as a solution. It could be the workplace, it could be the family, anywhere really where we can participate in collective decision making, not just major national level politics. Another one is, again, maintaining an attitude of care. So, technology should not be an element of self-satisfaction or instrumentality only. We need to also approach it from a place of non-domination, from a place of not dominating each other and not dominating nature. We should generalize care for others, especially for those who are negatively affected by technologies, AI included. And so, I really believe that there's a lot of promise in deepening these bonds of solidarity in the age of technology, in great part because technology can be a huge enabler of these potential communities of care. And in some ways, if not used wisely, it could, of course, be a threat. And finally, resist. So what does that mean? It basically means being open to contention and confrontation sometimes. We too often we let go of our agency and decision-making capabilities, thinking that somebody else can do it. Maybe there's expertise behind that, or politicians can handle that better. And who knows? I mean, sometimes they can, but there's also a good chance that they can't. And so we should be open to contention. We should be able to say no sometimes rather than yes. And again, more specifically, I'm talking about technologies like artificial intelligence here. So slowly we're coming to conclusions. And yeah, some of these ideas are things that I repeat in my book as well. Reclaiming democratic citizenship is more important than ever. AI is presented as the engine of life-transforming innovations brought to ordinary people by brilliant experts and the companies employing them. Some of its applications, like chatbots, are praised for interactivity, but what that means is that people interact with the final product given to them. In spite of all the corporate talk of stakeholder engagement, people affected by AI tools have almost no say in designing, developing, or deploying them. It is argued that anybody with relevant skills can be the next technology leader, but the truth is that the concentration of research and development severely limits competitiveness in the AI sector. It is safe to say that unless they organize to take part in the decisions that affect their lives, labor market transformations will happen to workers, not with them. Well, we can still have productive, enjoyable, safe, healthy, and meaningful personal lives and interconnected and democratic publics thanks to technology. So, let's not give up hope. There's a lot of reason for hope, in fact. We still can because it is not too late to reorder social and political life in ways that encourage a different kind of technology, production, and use. So, in other words, and to wrap up, I want to argue that we all humans are problem solvers. We are, in our own way, tool makers and tool users. So, in that way, each one of us really has that capability in us. From the time we woke up this morning, each one of us, until we got here, had to use multiple algorithms to get through our days. And so that is what we are really capable of doing. And we are also capable of building a community, sharing and caring. So I will end with another analogy from Hannah Arendt in The Human Condition, the table. So what is a table? She basically, says it's a simple tool, of course, and she says that the table separates us, right? Literally, physically, a table separates those of us on this side of the table from those sitting across from us. But that's precisely because that's also precisely how it brings us together, right? A table is where we have dinner, our conversations. That is where we build and maintain a community. And again, so the table is a simple tool that brings us all together. And I think that's what we need to be mindful of as builders and users of technology, AI included. The technologies that we build can have this function of building community, amplifying voices, and creating a more participatory space. It doesn't have to isolate us. It doesn't have to create divisions or hierarchies between us. even though the tendency might be going in that direction at times. And so we should really maintain that optimism, that democratic optimism. Now, we all need to ask ourselves some questions every time we use technology, and it's not always easy, but I think it's a good habit to develop. And what is this technology for? In what way does it benefit me? In what way does it benefit others? Does it empower someone, and does it empower others, and why? And what can we do to shape our collective future together? At the end of the day, I really believe that we can live harmoniously with technology, but we cannot do that through mindsets that are set to dominating one another. And again, I say that because that tendency, I think, is only too strong in some of the companies, businesses, as well as part of our political life today. And so we need to reclaim our agency, our decision-making power in the spirit of building a better world for each one of us and for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Onur.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go ahead, and for those of you online, I'm going to go ahead and post the speaker eval. So if you'll take a moment to do that, and we do have some time for questions. So I want to just kick us off. I know your new book is about governance of AI.
Mhm.
And so I was at a presentation recently with Pete Buttigieg, and one of the things he talked about in regards to AI is that a part of governance of AI should involve compensation for the American public for the intellectual, basically the collective intellectual that's been harnessed, and that there should be basically a AI tax or AI rebate that is paid back. Have you heard of this, and what do you think of it?
I mean, it's definitely a great idea. I've heard of it not so much in terms of like the whole public being paid, but I've heard that many times with creatives being paid. This idea that if an algorithm is ingesting all of Spotify to come up with different musical genres, then the artist should be paid better. Or if authors are um, seeing their works used to train AI data sets, then they should be paid better. In an ironic way, I feel like that is actually the only way to keep AI going as well. Just last year, internet traffic decreased by about 15%. And so even like, very well regarded websites like Mayo Clinic, for example, saw 10 to 15% declines in click rates. Now, that's a huge problem because just imagine a world where the Mayo Clinic website says, like, we're not going to publish any medical advice anymore or any medical information anymore. That, in a way, will lead to the collapse of the AI generated medical advice because they will have lost their most valuable input as data, right? And so I think in order to even keep the AI going in a reasonable way, yeah, something needs to be paid to the creatives, whoever those might be.
And then we have a question from Greg Rusi. How do faculty handle the ability of a university student to draft a term paper by punching keystrokes? And doesn't AI preclude research and learning skills?
Thank you, Greg. That's a difficult question. First of all, there is no easy way to catch AI output. So, old school plagiarism was when a student would not cite somebody else's ideas or information, and so if you could find that book that they failed to cite, that's a very clear case of plagiarism, right? So it's really about retrieving the information. With AI, the ideas are basically coming together, but the output does not belong to anyone. It is not written necessarily in anybody's words, and so it's very difficult to catch AI output, unless the student is so lazy that they really like don't take out some of the obvious identifiers of AI output, like I'm just a chatbot. So if the sentence like if that's there, but otherwise it's hard to catch that kind of output. Um, so there's definitely some level of honor code, but I think what the universities are also trying to do is rethink assessment design. So what kinds of assignments can we give that would be perhaps more helpful today? I know many of our colleagues are going back to the oral exams because, an oral exam is the surest way that you can actually get information from a student. Some of our faculty, including faculty in computer science, are going back to pen and paper exams. So the idea is that if you are good at writing code on pen and paper, you will be good at writing code on computer, but not necessarily vice versa because of AI output replacing critical thinking skills. And that's what it really comes down to. AI can make things really faster, more efficient, but there are certain things in life that shouldn't be efficient, and that one of those things is learning. Learning sometimes is a little bit of a struggle, right? It's a little bit of friction, wrestling with ideas, wrestling with oneself, and then sort of reaching a higher plane in understanding. And so we want to promote that among our students. And again, while there is no easy answer, I think careful assessment design, rethinking our pedagogies will go a long way.
I have another question for you, Onur. Who in a governance model, who's responsible when an AI system fails?
Also difficult question because typically an AI system, yeah, unlike the other tools, a simple liability model might not always work because the output might not necessarily come from one place. So, like say, when we're using an AI system in the workplace, it doesn't necessarily come from just one company or one software. It's usually two or three or four or five software systems lumped together. So ultimately, it has to be the human, of course. So it can't possibly be the algorithm itself. Algorithms don't have moral or legal responsibility. It comes down to the humans. Now, the humans could be the users, or it could be the company, and I think that's also a tricky one. So, say if somebody learns how to build a bomb using a chatbot, I mean, it's definitely the person building a bomb who's responsible. There is no question about that. But how about the company? Are they responsible for giving out such unsafe information? And I mean, so far, I don't think we have legal responses that are satisfactory. Again, the old school product liability models won't work, but what is going to replace that, I think, is another question. I have a colleague at the School of Law, Mark Shinan, and he wrote a book about algorithmic systems because this question that you're asking will be more and more and more important as AI agents make autonomous decisions. Some of the scariest scenarios, of course, come from the world of military applications. So, what happens if AI systems not only choose targets but actually decide firing on them, and they end up targeting a civilian? Who's responsible? I think in a standard military system, you have a chain of responsibility, chain of command. But what happens when an algorithm does that? That's very different from drones that are still human operated. With a fully autonomous AI system, I don't know if there's an answer, to be perfectly honest. And for there to be an answer, and Greg, maybe that also goes into your can AI actually be regulated question. We need not only a national or state level response, but an international one. We need to have some agreements at the international level about who bears responsibility and how those responsibilities will be carried out. So I believe the existing human rights model actually it can be a good guide. Our human rights treaties and international humanitarian law can be interpreted to incorporate AI-related harms. But again, today's international landscape is not very encouraging. But hopefully, we can, as humanity, we can come up with some shared solutions in the interests of everyone.
Can we talk about Tammy's an educator, so she's asking what might be the best advice you'd give to educators or parents to embrace or partner with AI on behalf of their students and teach kids the reality of AI wide net that can be hard to avoid?
Yeah, yeah. I think the most valuable thing that I always tell my students, and some of my students also tell me, is that AI cannot replace education. Yes, I mean, it can short circuit education, but at the end of the day, the skills that one needs in the future in the workplace and still need to be learned. To give some examples, the goal of, say, calculus, right? The goal of calculus is not just to solve really complicated problems. The goal is to understand optimization problems. Understanding calculus is understanding the rate of change, and people will always need optimization skills, no matter what algorithms they use. Or I'm a political scientist. I don't care for my students to memorize I don't know, the political systems and capitals of all the countries in the world. Like that's a useless skill. But they need to understand the major families of, say, congressional decision making or court systems, so that they can make sense in the world. They can go anywhere in the world and understand like how the politics of that country is working. And so those meta level skills are skills that they're absolutely supposed to learn. As a parent should be aware of that, and the kids too. I think the tendency to short circuit work makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're all busy, and kids these days are very busy too. So, like, why not spend 2 minutes on something that you would otherwise spend 5 hours on? But the thing is, I think our best option is to teach them more about AI literacy and tell them that, like, in order to, acquire the critical thinking skills they are going to acquire, that are absolutely, important for their futures, they will have to do the hard and slow work. I am hoping that, some of the worst abuses of AI in education that we see will slowly go away over time. I think in education, some fashions come and go, and so the AI movement will be one where I think we're going to retain a lot of the stuff from the AI movement, but we are not going to turn K through 12 into AI K through 12 and universities into AI universities. Sometimes I feel that this movement is similar to the massive online courses movement that was like a decade and a half ago. So there was this fashion that everything should be an online course, like, everything should be like Coursera. And then at the end of the day, that's not what happened at all. Still, we have human teachers teaching and performing incredible work in raising kids. And the online component was helpful during COVID, for example. So like it actually did end up being useful, but it wasn't the projected model that all teachers will be replaced by videos. And similarly, I think, yeah, I mean, AI will be a movement where we are going to take some of the useful elements, but we are not going to lose, hopefully, our professions to AI altogether.
So Tammy expresses her appreciation for that one. And there's another question. How do you put common sense into AI to prevent the output?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is really no sort of waterproof, bulletproof solution. But one thing that works, I think, is to train our data better. So again, most of today's chatbots train on just about anything, right? Any piece of textual data that AI companies can get their hands on. So it could be online forums, it could be books, and sometimes it could be parts of the dark web that most of us really don't have any access to. So like they train using any and all of that text. But for example, if you are serious about medical advice, perhaps medical texts will be way more influential and important than everything else on the web. So I think sort of prioritizing area knowledge can go to some extent, it can go some length in addressing the BS problem. Again, it doesn't take care of it once and for all because these are probabilistic systems. So every once in a while, they are going to still produce hallucinations and so on and so forth. But hopefully, focusing more on data architectures with expertise knowledge, will help to address some of those problems.
Okay. Another question, how do you embed AI with values to prevent harm? And then kind of a follow-up that who gets to define harm, the value of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whose values is a very important question. And I think that's why democracy is really helpful because we could ask the same questions about non-AI problems, right? Like, whose values are we governed by? And in a democracy, ideally, we're governed by values that, one, are the values of at least a majority, if not maybe a consensus, and two, values that we hold to be maybe at a higher level than other values. So, for example, constitutional norms, right? So we tend to assume that those are longer lasting than everyday legislation. And so, in a similar vein, I think AI values should be the values of the societies they're embedded in. Uh, and those values should be democratic because again the same society's values sometimes doesn't make sense if there is no democratic decision making mechanism, and especially because AI systems are reflective of company decisions more than anything. There is no easy way to simply make those decisions as citizens. I think the best thing we can do is pressure companies to basically reflect our values. So, for example, if we care about migrants' rights, that is something that we should know companies. We should let companies know. Um, or if we care that the values that an AI system should hold perhaps should include the protection of teenagers from online harms. We should definitely pressure the humans who are operating AI systems to build those values into those systems. Because by themselves, companies don't always do that, or sometimes they walk back their commitments. And so we, as democratic publics should always pressure them to hang on to their values, or our values, rather. Sorry.
So I did post a link to Onur's new book, which is Governing AI, a Primer, in the chat section. And I want to go back to maybe just a final question. So for all of us who are active participants in democracy, what do you think, what should we be doing to actively engage with AI from a political standpoint?
That is an excellent question. And of course, I didn't really talk about current politics or any such thing. As it stands in the US, there is no federal AI legislation, and maybe there won't be for some time. But the state level or the city level are sort of levels of decision making where I think politicians are quite a bit more amenable to public demand. So, in fact, if anything, I think like state legislative debates take in people, including in Zoom sessions, and they're underutilized resources. So I think we can let our representatives, perhaps at a more local level than the federal one, also at the federal one for sure, let them know about our expectations, our demands, our values when it comes to using AI. Again, I mean, I don't know if this will be the solution, but I think it is better than remaining silent and letting others shape the agenda.
Yeah. Okay. Onur, I want to thank you so much for coming tonight and for sharing your thoughts. It was
It was my pleasure.
so much to learn and so much to take in. Really, really helpful. Lots to think about. Thank you so much to everybody who was able to join us again. And I want to again remind you, Onur's new book just came out, Governing AI, a Primer, and there's a link to it in the chat section if you want to check it out. Just released.
Yeah. And there's a discount code, and I don't set the price. The publisher does. So, I'm sorry for the price, but yeah, there's a 20% discount code. I believe it is GGAI. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. It was such an honor, and I hope to talk to you again in the future. Take good care.
Thank you, Onur. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Good night.